نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we're finally on hadith number 4. I skipped it last week for a particular specific topic for last week about the Mawlid. Then I was away for a week or two before that, or maybe 3, I'm not quite sure. So it's been quite a while since we covered hadith number 3 from Imam Nawawi's 40 hadith, and so we're on hadith number 4 inshallah, and I probably will divide this into two parts, this week and next week. It's quite a lengthy hadith. There are a few important issues that need to be tackled, and then there are probably a few areas that I could see possibly being open for discussion given the nature of the hadith. So I'd like to entertain questions like that inshallah. And hadith number 4 of Imam Nawawi's 40 hadith rahmatullah alayhi is where he relates عن أبي عبد الرحمن عبد الله بن مسعود رضي الله عنه قال حدثنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو الصادق المصدوق إن أحدكم يجمع خلقه في بطن أمه 40 يوما نطفة ثم يكون علق مثل ذلك ثم يكون مضغة مثل ذلك ثم يرسل إليه الملك فينفخ فيه الروح ويؤمر ب4 كلمات بكتب رزقه وأجله وعمله وشقي أو سعيد فوالله الذي لا إله غيره فوالله الذي لا إله غيره إن أحدكم ليعمل بعمل أهل الجنة حتى ما يكون بينه وبينها إلا ذراع فيسبق عليه الكتاب فيعمل بعمل أهل النار فيدخلها وإن أحدكم ليعمل بعمل أهل النار حتى ما يكون بينه وبينها إلا ذراع فيسبق عليه الكتاب فيعمل بعمل أهل الجنة فيدخلها رواه البخاري ومسلم. On the authority of Abdurrahman Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, may Allah be pleased with him, who said, the Messenger of Allah, may the blessings and peace of Allah be upon him, and he is the truthful and the one to be believed, narrated to us. Indeed, the creation of each one of you is brought together in his mother's womb for 40 days in the form of a seed. Then he is a clot of blood for a like period, and then a morsel of flesh for a like period. And then there is sent to him the angel who blows the breath of life into him and who is commanded about 4 matters: to write down his means of livelihood, his lifespan, his actions, and whether happy or unhappy, whether happy or sad. By Allah, other than whom there is no other God. Verily, one of you behaves like the people of paradise until there is but an arm's length between him and it, and that which has been written overtakes him, and so he behaves like the people of hellfire, and thus he enters it. And one of you behaves like the people of hellfire until there is but an arm's length between him and it, and that which has been written overtakes him, and so he behaves like the people of paradise, and thus enters it. Related by Al-Bukhari and Muslim. So the main theme of this hadith is what we call qada and qadr, or al-qadr, which can be translated in a number of ways. Al-qadr can be predestination, pre-decree, destiny, the pre-measuring out of things by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of those words relate to the idea of qada and qadr, that Allah has set a judgment and a decree about any and everything before creation was created. And that's what we call pre-decree. And also if you bear in mind, and if you remember, and of course you'll know this offhand, that it's one of the 6 articles of Muslim faith, of the Aqidah. Iman, faith in Allah, His books, His angels, His messengers, the last day, and Qadr, divine decree, both the good and bad consequences thereof. And therefore, whoever denies Qadr, just rejects it out of hand entirely, leaves the fold of Islam as if someone rejected any other article of faith out of those 6 usul, fundamental points of belief of a Muslim. So in that sense, it's not really possible for Muslims to be like the Jews are considered today, even by many amongst themselves, let alone the outside community, that, well, I don't really believe in Moses, I'm not quite sure if I believe in God, but I am still a Jew. Okay, because it's now become a cultural thing, that as long as your mother is a Jew, and whether you believe or not. Okay, and you have some Jews like that, who literally they're not quite sure if they believe in Moses or the Mosaic law, and some of them are, I'm not quite sure I believe in God, but they're still going to be considered to be Jews. Of course, not by every Jew. I dare say Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox Jews would, using our terminology, would never consider them to be Jewish in that sense. But it has become like that, and there is a danger that Islam becomes like that and Muslims become like that. It's somehow seen as a cultural thing, whereas religion essentializes a Muslim as being one who has certain beliefs, and then hopefully does the practices which gives concrete expression to those specific beliefs. And one of those specific beliefs is the belief of Al-Qadr, divine decree or predestiny. And it's a rather lengthy hadith, and there are some issues, and I'd like to just today, I'd like to actually, I'm using my family, my wife's notes, and these notes are based upon a class that a previous 40 hadith class that I was doing, and she showed them to me today, and I realised, well, we went into a lot of detail, and this is far more detail than what I've done in any of these classes. But I thought, let's just not have some fun. That's kind of the wrong word. But let's push the envelope a bit, and let's go into some detail, only just to show what our scholars and ulama can and have got up to. Some of the kind of ways of thinking and attitudes that come along in the hadith. But I don't want it to be academic. I still want us to take home some simple, clear points, because that's really the greatest matter of knowledge. Knowledge should lead to an action, an amal. Either an amal of the qalb, I walk away from a circle of knowledge, or I walk away from reading a book, and I have a greater sense of fear of God, hope in His mercy, or love and yearning for Him, or a stronger reliance upon Him, greater sense of loyalty towards Him and His teachings. Then that's like or a greater patience with His decree, or even higher than that, rida bil qada, being satisfied and content with what He unfolds for me in my life. Or an action, that it leads me to prayer, or more prayer, fasting, or more fast, to doing good, to any action of amal saleh. If knowledge that we gain doesn't lead to a'malul qulub, the actions of the heart, a'malul qalb, or amalul jawari, actions of the limbs, then that knowledge in Islam is considered to be not beneficial for that individual, at least at that time of his or her life. And the Prophet ﷺ, he sought refuge and protection in Allah from knowledge which does not benefit. Oh Allah, I seek protection in you. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa'u. Oh Allah, I seek refuge and protection in you from knowledge which does not benefit. Okay? And so each of us have to see how we are benefiting from knowledge, and beneficial knowledge is action of the heart or it leads to an action of the limbs. Why? Because knowledge should lead to action, otherwise we've missed the point. And that has to be emphasized again and again and again, because we could remember it today and we could be with that today, but next week shaitan could make us forget, our nafs could sidetrack us, and we get into these big discussions about religion. But when it comes to basic actions, okay, we will talk about, I remember when, I can't remember what year it was, but there was this kind of global campaign, I think, Make Poverty History. And there was, I mean, there was some big march for it up in Scotland, and then the day after there were all these kind of concerts and whatever in London, wherever. But the point was to raise an awareness to make poverty history. And I remember that one of the brothers found out that my wife and myself, we were going up to Scotland for it, because it was something that I've kind of, not make poverty history, but just the whole thing on making poverty history is something that we feel kind of passionate about, although we're not really great activists in that sense. And he said, oh, but it's always rubbish and this and that. I said, well, look, if you think it's rubbish, then you don't have to go. And it's not in the Quran that you have to go to make poverty history up in Scotland. But you have to try to make poverty history in the sense of feeding the poor and alleviating worldwide hunger, starting with your doorstep at least. That much you have to do. And then you just have to ask yourself, brother, that whilst we're going up there doing our little thing, and clearly it's a little thing, you need to ask yourself what you're doing. And if you're doing something, alhamdulillah, you should have a contentment between you and Allah. And if you're not doing something, then your words are just futile, they're childish. Actually, they're black, they're dark. Why? Because you're putting someone off doing something, even if it's 1%, and make him do no percent. And in Islam, we have a rule, a qaida, not al-qaida. Okay, just in case anyone's listening or whatever. Alhamdulillah. I've got a story there about that as well, qaida. Anyway, which is, if you cannot achieve the whole, then achieving the part is better than achieving nothing. If you cannot achieve the whole of something, then achieving the part is the next Islamic thing. Islam never has it that, oh, you can't do it properly, don't do it at all. Otherwise, we'd never pray. Who prays with that khushu', with that obligation of the inner, tranquil, reverent awe, standing in front of Allah Jalla wa Ala, with absolute sincerity? No. I mean, 3/4 of the prayer for most of us is like, we're in some other land, not standing in front of Allah. I mean, we're standing in front of Allah, but we're not. Our heart-wise, there's no hudur al-qalb. But if I remember in the 4th rak'ah, something jogs my memory, I'm praying, I'm standing in front of Allah. I don't think, well, just wasted the last 3 rak'ahs thinking of Man U or whatever. No, I just let me focus. And then afterwards I make tawbah and I ask Allah to give me the dedication and the presence of heart, dedication to pray with presence of heart. And that becomes the greatest goal of the believer, to pray and make sajda to Allah with pure presence of heart in this world. Kind of that becomes like the ambition. What do you want to be when you grow up? Spaceman, a ballerina, or this, and I want to pray with presence of heart. Right? So just keep that in mind. So the qadr is a real central belief of the Muslims. So what we have here is Abu Abdurrahman, which is the kunya, the agnonym of Ibn Mas'ud, father of Abdurrahman. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, radiallahu anhu, Ibn Mas'ud, who is a very famous companion. He is the 6th person to enter into Islam. There are only 5 other adults before him. Okay? And he, radiallahu anhu, may Allah be pleased with him, he had such a deep connection with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even though he wasn't related by blood like Ali radiallahu anhu, okay? But he would be someone who is almost like he was a relative, because he would be so frequently in the house of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam because of his khidmah, his service to the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. He would be a person who would hold the Prophet's shoes when the Prophet would answer the call of nature. He would be the one who would bring the water on such an occasion. He would be the one to help the Prophet make wudu by bringing the vessel of water. All of these acts of loving service, Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu would do. And he's narrated in the canonical hadith collections about just under 900 hadiths. Okay? He is one of the greatest of the Sahaba in terms of knowledge. Not just one of the earliest Muslims, but also one of the greatest of the Sahaba. He has to his credit, and I'd just like to read one or two things he has to his credit, inshallah ta'ala. He has to his credit, first and foremost, that he is the first person to recite the Quran publicly in front of the idolaters in Mecca. Okay. Because the Prophet ﷺ didn't want the Muslims to recite the Quran publicly, because it would have caused a huge backlash, as he kind of. But Ibn Mas'ud did so, inshallah ta'ala. Okay. Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, the Prophet ﷺ says about Ibn Mas'ud, "Raditu li ummati ma radiyahu ibn abd." I am pleased for my ummah what pleases Ibn Abd, and that's another name for Ibn Mas'ud. I am pleased for my ummah that which pleases Ibn Mas'ud. SubhanAllah, that's a fantastic thing to say about someone. In fact, we don't find the Prophet ﷺ saying something like that for anyone apart from Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu. Umar radiyallahu anhu, when he sends Ibn Mas'ud to Kufa, which is in Iraq, which is still in Iraq, okay, what happens is in the Caliphate of Umar, the second caliph, when the conquests and the futuhat were being made, Iraq was conquered. And once initially the Muslim army comes into Iraq, which is the center of civilization for thousands of years, okay, even before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, okay, it's the cradle of civilization for thousands of years. It's kind of gone on the decline just before the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, but it's still got all of that learning and history there. What happens is the army, they camp somewhere, the victorious army of the Muslims camp in this place called Kufa, and Kufa becomes what is known as a garrison town. It's really where the army, and maybe once everything is settled, you might get the family of the army come, and then little shops and things are opening and whatever. And that small garrison town turns into a proper town, and that town then very quickly, very rapidly, turns into a huge city. So much so that within less than a generation and a half, by the time of the second generation of Muslims, less than a generation, Kufa becomes one of the four greatest centers of knowledge within the known Muslim territories. The other three being Mecca, obviously, Medina, obviously, Basra, which is also in Iraq, and Kufa. And Ibn Mas'ud has gone to Kufa. Umar radiallahu anhu sends him, and Umar radiallahu anhu says to the people, I'm sending to you one who I prefer his knowledge over my own knowledge. Umar radiallahu anhu is saying, I'm sending to you someone who I prefer his knowledge over my knowledge. And that is the status of Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, who said on one particular occasion, if I knew someone who had more knowledge of the Book of Allah than I would have travelled to gain that knowledge from him. But he didn't travel to gain that knowledge from him, because generally there wasn't anyone greater than him. And then what happens, and Dr. Salim would have liked this, but he's not here, what happens is that lays the seeds for a very famous juristic school or madhab to evolve. Anybody? Hanafis, okay? Because Ibn Mas'ud has these students. Alqamah, for example, is one of his main students, okay? And Al-Aswad, another student. And then these two students and others, okay, and they're brilliant scholars of their time, of the second generation. They have various students, and one of them is Ibrahim Nakhai, who again from the second generation of Muslims, brilliant jurist, an absolute intellect, juristically. And he has Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman, who then inherits that juristic legacy. I mean, there are others who inherit it as well in that area, but he's the kind of flag bearer. And Hamad ibn Abi Sulaiman then becomes Abu Hanifa's main teacher in the initial quest of his learning. And then, of course, then he becomes the flag bearer of that method that goes all the way back to Ibn Mas'ud in terms of how to give fatwas, how to kind of look at the book and the sunnah and derive rulings, and what kind of methods. It's not that Abu Hanifa takes only that, he adds to it, he elaborates on it, he refines it, and so on, but that forms the basis. Okay? And actually, just to give you an example of the beauty of Islam, and this applies to all the madhabs, not just Hanafis, but if you take Sheikh Mufti Taqi today, Mufti Taqi Uthmani, who's a very well-known Hanafi scholar of great repute in the world at the moment, but he hails from Pakistan, but he's acknowledged as he's on the committee of scholars in the Meccan Council of Fiqh, the Fiqh Council, which is held in Mecca every so often. If you look at, and he's just an example, I mean, he's not the only one by far. Between him and the Prophet ﷺ, there are 39 teachers. So his teacher, who learned from his teacher, who learned from his teacher, who learned from him, that would be going all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. If you include him, ﷺ, that's 40 people. And if you take Sheikh Ayman, the Egyptian Tajweed master, when a group of us met him in Wales back in, I think, 2000, or 1999, 2000, I can't remember. His sanad, his chain, or one of his chains, has 31 people. Not 41, 31. Because one of his chains is, this 109-year-old is one of his teachers who took his authorization, his ijazah from a 106-year-old, who took it from a 99-year-old, who took it from a 112-year-old, who took it. So that kind of, you can see, that cuts out quite a lot. But actually, just thinking about it, what that tells you is look at the transmission of knowledge. Even though 1400 years ago, it's 31 human beings. These 31 human beings have a level of truthfulness and honesty, let alone knowledge and piety, that is well above the average norm. So when a righteous, God-fearing scholar says, my teacher took from his teacher, who took from his teacher, and there's only 35 or 39 or 40 people between me and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, be sure that's a lot of knowledge being preserved by pious hearts. And that is the blessing Allah has given you and me today. And that is why I cannot stress that the great bulk of the Islamic teachings don't need to be interfered with at all. Okay? Because they have been passed on from the hearts of people, hearts of men, by men I mean women as well, hearts of men from the hearts of men from the hearts of men, 31, 35, 40 people back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But no doubt at all, we have new issues which need new rulings. We have some old issues that are just not workable given the new context. That's not because of some compromise or some what was that word that Malcolm X, rahmatullah alayhi, used? House Negro. Okay, because we're trying to be some house Negro, yes massa, 3 bags full mouth. No, it's because it's not workable because the righteous minds can see it's not workable. Okay, and some things that are workable but they need a little bit of tweaking. So we're not talking about ijtihad no longer exists or doesn't need to be done. Everything in the past is exactly as it should be now, but we're saying the bulk of it need not be tampered with. Okay. So this is Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, becomes one of the great companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of the great scholars of Islam, and in particular becomes the foundation, the wellspring for the fiqh of Iraq, which is the fiqh of the Hanafis. Okay, and Imam Shafi'i rahmatullahi alayhi says all of the children, all of the fuqaha, the jurists, are children in the lap of Abu Hanifa. All of the fuqaha are children in the lap of Abu Hanifa. Malik radiallahu anhu would say that I know a man, and he would be leaning in one of the pillars in the Prophet's masjid, and he'd be teaching, and on one occasion he says, I know a man who, if he told you this pillar was made of gold, and it's not, it's made of stone, right, or whatever, brick, then he would convince you, meaning the great intellectual mind of Abu Hanifa. And one of the occasions that they met, and I'm not quite sure how many times they met, Malik, rahmatullah alayhi, puts Abu Hanifa on his right-hand side, even though Abu Hanifa's senior anyway in age, but Malik is the Imam of Medina. Right? So there is this great thanks that we owe Allah that goes through that legacy of the people of Kufa. Okay, starting with Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari and Ali radiallahu anhu. Okay, because Ali radiallahu anhu, in order to keep the sanctity of Medina when the civil war flares up in his caliphate, he moves the caliphate, the khilafah, from Medina to avoid bloodshed and disrespecting the hurma of Medina, and he moves it over to Kufa, to Iraq. Okay. So it was Ibn Mas'ud, and then Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, and then later on Ali radiallahu anhu puts his blessed feet there and his blessed mind. So there's a huge thing. So it's like, it's a bit kind of, it's a bit ahistorical, meaning that it's really kind of like a historically neutral or even anti-historical to say that, oh right, you know, these people, they're far away from the Sunnah. Because if we're talking about transmission of hearts of men to the hearts of men to the hearts of men, and you have three of the most knowledgeable, or at least two, Ali and Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu are there to lay foundations, and then you just have these great scholars rising up there, recognized by early Islam. Yes, each scholar can miss out some knowledge of the Sunnah that another scholar has, and that's absolutely clear. That even happened amongst the companions. Okay, no doubt at all. And it becomes easier with Tadween al-Hadith, with the collections of Hadith in one particular book or area to begin to collate all of the Sunnah. But subhanallah, and the Prophet is praying 5 times a day, and Ibn Mas'ud is witnessing it, and Ali then is witnessing it, and they're witnessing it probably from the first or second or third row, right? Because they're not yet little. They're not like Ibn Abbas or Ibn Umar, who are, because they're, 13, 14, 9, 10. They have to be at the back row for between the men and the women. Okay. And though they can each forget as individuals, as any human being can, but by and large, regular things that were done regularly, it's unlikely it's just going to be totally lost and forgotten. Okay, so alhamdulillah. And I say that not as a Hanafi. Okay, so that's an idea of Ibn Mas'ud, and I just wanted to go through a little bit just to, kind of just situate these people and what they're doing. And Ibn Mas'ud is also someone who witnesses all of the battles of the Muslims, partakes in all of the battles of Badr and Uhud and you name it. Okay, so this is an incredible person, radiyallahu anhu. Okay, so how does this hadith start? This hadith actually starts in a rather strange way, because Ibn Mas'ud says, حدثنا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وهو الصادق المصدوق. The Messenger of Allah relates to us, and he is as-sadiq al-masduq. Now, there are some companions who use this word as-sadiq al-masduq. Sadiq means truthful, and masduq is the one who, because he is truthful, you should accept his truth. So he is, they've translated it quite well as he is the truthful, the believed. The one to be believed in because he is truthful. Okay? There is some discussion amongst the classical ulama about this. They say, why does Ibn Mas'ud narrate this hadith and he puts that he sallallahu is as-sadiq al-masduq? Because the other 800 odd hadiths Ibn Mas'ud relates, he doesn't ever use this term. But he does for this hadith. One reason offered by some scholars is, well, look, actually Ibn Mas'ud is saying, look, he's Sadiq al-Masduq, I'm going to relate to you something about the fetus and the birth of the child in the womb, and this is, and if there are any scientists amongst you of the time, you're going to find this completely contradictory to what you might hear from the Greeks, from the Persians, from the Byzantines, from the Indians, from the Chinese, from whatever, from the Jewish rabbis and scribes, because they just believed in whatever the science of the time was, which was not this. So I'm going to relate something really that seems to be out of sync with our thinking, but he is Sadiq al-Masduq. He's the one who is truthful and to be believed in. So just believe him over anything that you may think is empirical and scientific of the day. Okay? Other scholars say, no, that's not the reason why he said that, but they don't offer much of an explanation. Some scholars say, well, other companions used it for mundane hadiths. You know, even just small hadiths. Sometimes a companion will say, and he is as-Sadiq al-Masduq, and the Prophet ﷺ did this or said this, and it's really a mundane thing, not a really huge thing. So wallahu alam about why he says he's Sadiq al-Masduq, or it could just simply be a reaffirmation that the Prophet ﷺ, he doesn't speak from his own desires. وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ, the Quran says. Okay, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ, he doesn't speak from his own desires or personal opinions. Okay, إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ, this is nothing but revelation sent down to him. Okay, subhanAllah. So that's one of the reasons why he might have mentioned as-Sadiq al-Masduq. And then the hadith starts, إِنَّ أَحَدَكُمْ يُجْمَعُ خَلْقُهُ فِي بَطْنِ أُمِّهِ أَرْبَعِينَ يَوْمًا. Each one of you is brought together in the belly of his mother for 40 days. So we are now talking about how a child, a fetus, evolves in the womb. And this may seem like a piece of scientific knowledge, okay, because we associate this with biological things and the field of medicine, okay. In the form of a seed, okay. Each one of you is brought together in the belly of his womb, in the belly of his mother for 40 days, in the form of a nutfa, a seed, and then an alaka, a clot of blood, and then a mudgha, this lump of flesh or morsel of flesh. For 40 days period, nutfa, 40 days period, alaka, 40 days period, mudgha. That makes 120 days. And then there is sent to him an angel who blows the breath of life into him and who is commanded about 4 matters. So then the ruh, this special thing that Allah has honored, this special created thing that Allah has created and made very honorable, and He has allowed it to be infused in man, which then makes man very, very different than other creatures, even though he may have many physical, biological, material similarities. Our DNA may be very close to the DNA of a banana, and perhaps even closer to a DNA of a monkey. Our forms may look quite similar to certain of the ape creatures, certain gorillas, orangutans, obviously less here, it depends where you come from actually. We may share all of these physical, biological traits with other creatures. There may be, and fossil records and DNA tend to suggest that there clearly are hominid fossils, not Homo sapien, not man fossils, but hominid, man-like fossils. And leaving alone that proceeds, that we can discover 2.5 million years ago, 1 million years ago, 500,000 years ago. Of course, they vary in the shape of their skull. Okay, Australopithecus discovered 2.5 million years ago, huge protruding forehead, brain the third of the size of brain capacities today. Okay, jaw very protruding, teeth sharp, stature very big. And then after Australopithecus, you have these kind of bones that could fall into the category of Homo habilis, tool-using man, or tool-using man-like creature, hominid. Brain is slightly bigger, forehead is not as big, but seems to be more aggressive, bigger. They lived for a certain time, and then after that came something else, and then something, and then you begin to get between, they say, 20 to 80,000 years, or 30 to 100,000 years ago, what looked bones and fossils which look very much like modern man. Brain capacity is what it is today. Forehead and bones are very much like it is today. So even if those fossil records are true, and they do seem to be true at some level, there have been hoaxes over the last 80, 90 years, no doubt at all, but there is just so much, and how they date them, just to, if we don't have a background in science, my personal opinion is we shouldn't enter into this. Why? Because we may then darken the Islamic reputation unknowingly. So, for example, how do they know how to date? Were they there? No, of course no one was there. No one of us was there 2 million years ago. But there is this thing not only called carbon dating, which is pretty good, but better than carbon dating, using other subatomic molecules, which the decay rate of even better, and that they have decay rates, half-lives of 10,000 years, 80,000 years, 200,000 years, 500,000 years, or 4 million years, that they can use that as a good dating procedure. There's some sophisticated things going on, and one just has to, either one knows them or one doesn't. But you can't just reject specialists. So you have these hominid-like, and even, so here's the point that I want to make, even if we were to say, let's cut out the argument and the difference between some of the scholars that are not Muslim scholars, just scholars in science and paleontologists, those who are experts on these fossils, okay, and geneticists. Let's just say that, leaving all the difference of opinion amongst them, that we agree that yes, there are these these hominid-like creatures that existed 4 million years ago, 2 million years ago, and whatever, and they walked upright on 2 legs, they were bipeds, and by Homo habilis time, they are tool-using, that's more or less what Homo habilis means, and they're living in little groups, right? And they're drawing paintings on the wall, very crude paintings, and they're making jewellery, necklace, stones and beads and whatever. And they've got some clubs and 1 or 2 other basic instruments, and they seem to be somewhere in their 500,000 years, million-year lifespan, they're burying their dead. We would still say that that is not a proof that they were insan. Because insan is not just this physical thing, it's the ruh. It's the ruh that Allah blows into Adam alayhi salam that makes him very distinct. Okay? Very distinct. And we don't know from science that, is it possible or not for there to be a creature like us, not exactly, but similar to us, but maybe without ruh, so they're actually just more animal instinctive than human instinctive. They don't have the ability to think of the future, or the ability for speech, or the ability to think abstractly on a higher term beyond, how do I get away from the elephant to get my food? Okay. What I'm trying to say is, we shouldn't be fazed by modern science and the great work it has done, Darwin onwards. Okay, because when Darwin proposed his theory of evolution, there weren't any fossil records, but he said that according to the theory there should be. After his death, within 20, 25 years, they dug up some fossils, wherever it was, Java man or Peking man or wherever. But since then, there's been a truckful, not too many. It's not going to fit into this mosque, all right? But it's been a few truckfuls, 1 or 2 truckfuls. But the DNA has come along. And we should at least entertain the possibility that there were creatures that looked like man-like creatures, that had so much resemblance to us, but they were not man who had the ruh blown into him, which was only Adam alayhi salam in heaven. And then he was put on earth with his wife. And there is nothing in the Quran to say you cannot believe that. But there is too much in the Quran to say that you must believe that Adam alayhi salam was the first insan, bashar. And if you say that the whole story of Adam is an allegory, a metaphor, that it's not really to be taken as we've traditionally taken it, that requires butchering the Arabic language and all those verses in such a way that it's almost batini interpretation. Almost deviant interpretation, because there is a sophisticated way of understanding the Arabic Quran, obviously along with the Hadiths, which you cannot adhere to at all if you follow the way of those who move away from this unbroken chain. Sheikh Taqi Uthmani, Prophet, 40 human beings in between, 40 religious scholars in between actually. Sheikh Ayman, the Prophet, Tajweed, 31 human beings in between. Right? And these 30, 40 people have been transmitting out of fear and piety and love of God the right understanding, from the right understanding. And they fit in that statement of the Prophet. This knowledge will be carried by the trustworthy ones of every generation. And these trustworthy ones will expel from knowledge, the misinterpretation of the ignorant, the deviation of the deviants, and the extremism of the extremists. That's what the Prophet said. And it happened, and it's happening. And once we understand that, we have a great confidence. And that's why science doesn't faze us. We then take it, and science is of various levels. There are things which are factual in science. There are things which are speculative in science. And there are things which are downright wrong in science. And given tomorrow or 2 days later, it will be changed. Okay? But as a whole, we can benefit so much. And that's the same with evolution. Evolution, the theory of evolution, posits or says things which are factual. And some of the things it comes up with are speculative. And some things which it comes up with is just pure guesswork. There was a, and I've moved far, but I'd like to, once I'm on this, I might have explored. Did anyone see, some years ago, I think it was the beginning of the 2000s, there was this really fantastic BBC documentary, Walking with Dinosaurs. Anyone see it? Walking with Dinosaurs. Mashallah, fantastic program. Over 6 series and whatever, or 6 episodes. And if you, like, so I got the DVD for my kids when they were little, and we watched it, and then watched a bit of the making of Walking with Dinosaurs. And my son, actually, I think it was my son, he did ask a question in one of these episodes. Is that what they really look like? I said, well, son, since we're talking about, 65 million years ago is when the last of the dinosaurs died out, seemingly with an asteroid impacting on Earth, and then, within a day or two, these giant creatures are gone. 65 million years is a long time. So I couldn't tell you, son, what they looked like or what they didn't look like. But we got bones and fossils, and we went to the London Museum many years before that, and he saw that. But he says, is that what they look like? And what he meant by that, not is that what they look like in size, because he'd seen the bones in the museums. He was talking about the colours. And so when we were when we were watching the making of Walking with Dinosaurs, the people said that actually, just to add a little bit of zest and zeal to the program, we kind of like were a bit easygoing with what colours we made these dinosaurs. Because if they were kind of dark brown, murky tree brown, I mean, it's not really an exciting viewing, and you've got your DVD that's just come out in 1999, 2000, you've got all brown colours. No, so there was all these really vibrant colours, and they just added to them. Just like what NASA do, not all the time, but some of the time, to some of the nebulae. These gaseous things in space, and there's the Rose Nebula and the Horsehead Nebula, and nebula is what they are. There's just large areas of space which are gaseous, and they are the cradle of where stars and planets will begin to form ultimately, because slowly and steadily, the gravity will coalesce, will bind some of this gas into more permanent hard bodies, and that will become bigger and bigger and bigger, and at some stage a big planet, like a lump of rock like Jupiter, if it gets big enough and dense enough, there'll be an internal ignition in it to start a flame. Point being is, they say some of those beautiful colorations are not actually how they are in space, but that's what some of the NASA guys do. Not to all of them, to some of them, just to kind of perk them up. So there is a bit of artistic license, poetic license, they say. So no doubt at all, there's poetic license, but at least we should appreciate it. And Muslims should have that sense of, you know, and you've mentioned it so many times before, to mention it, you know, to have that sense of, don't feel offended by science. And we don't have to be on the back foot. Neither do we have to give a reply to everything right now, especially when science is an evolving project. Science is an evolving project. Okay. So, alhamdulillah, we should be open to the possibility. There were creatures, human-like creatures, before Adam alayhi salam. But Adam alayhi salam is the first insan, the first bashar. No one before him of insan. Okay, and he didn't have parents. He didn't come out of the normal birth process. These Homo habilis, they came out, maybe came out of that process. Adam alayhi salam, one moment he wasn't there, or he wasn't there with his rule, and the next minute he is. And there are these authentic hadiths in Bukhari and Muslim. I know Martin Lings, rahmatullahi alayhi wa afu anhu, Abu Bakr Siraj al-Din, he makes a really beautiful point. SubhanAllah, really, such a God-gifted point. He says, if you believe, and this is not his main argument, but it's just like kind of what he just threw on top. If you believe that the whole of the religious, the Abrahamic traditions, and by that he means Jews, Christians, and Muslims, those who trace their to heavenly revealed scripture, as opposed to Zoroastrians and Hindus and whatever, Manichaeans or whatever. Right? He says, if you believe that Allah would allow every righteous believer in that tradition, and the Jews as a qawm, you know, 4,000 to 5,000 years old, okay. Christians as a qawm, 2,000 odd years old. Muslims as a qawm, the Muslims following the part of the the process is 1,500 years old. But you believe that Allah blinded them to the truth of the reality that Adam wasn't the first man, actually he just came through the evolution process, so there he was born of two slightly ape human-like creatures then that made him. And then they came from whatever, and further down that they were part of the Homo habilis, Homo australopithecus thing. If you believe that they all got that wrong, and actually they all believe the opposite of it, not they just got it wrong, because the Quran doesn't, righteous people didn't know about, you know, the nature of electricity, okay, or electromagnetism until Faraday. So righteous people can not know so many things. The point is, they didn't only not know that evolution point, that Darwinian point, they believe the total opposite. Adam was the first man, no man before Adam. And that somehow you'd get someone who is at best an agnostic, at worst an atheist, Darwin, okay, that he says about himself in his writings, that at one time I'm an agnostic, I'm not quite sure, I don't believe in God, I don't disbelieve in God, I'm on the fence. And at another point of his life, it's kind of, well, he's not a believer, he doesn't even believe in God. And that somehow an agnostic stroke atheist, Allah would send him the truth in opposition to the salihun of Tawheed from 5,000 years back. Then you haven't understand how Allah honors the believers. And that is not a proof in and of itself, but it's something, it's a qarina, it's an additional thing to think of. We're actually doing, in case of any of you who came in late, we're doing hadith number 4 about qadr. But I've just, I've kind of trodden on these kind of various areas. That's only because as-sadiq al-masduq, and the nature of, for the first 40 days, nutfa. For the second 40 days, the fetus is alaqa, this clinging like substance. And the third 40 days, it's mudgha. It's kind of clothed with some type of flesh. And then the angel is sent to breathe into him the spirit, to breathe him in the ruh, which I'll translate as spirit, and who is commanded to write about 4 matters.